All right, what's up, fellas? Today we're going to talk about my 7 favorite foods for gaining strength. You're going to have to forgive me for the title being a wee bit clickbaity. They seem to get twice as many views with that little bit more clickable title. So I figure as long as the topic is still quality and the information is still quality, you're going to have to forgive me for the obnoxious titles. I figure it'll get the what I view as a positive message to more people. So you're gonna have to bear with me. You got to play the game on some level, apparently. Can't say I'm a fan of that being how the platform works, but we're gonna play along. So getting into it, gonna attach the obvious caveat to the beginning. These foods don't magically make you stronger. They need to be included in an intelligently structured diet. Just in eating them haphazardly will not make you stronger. But if you have a somewhat structured diet to begin with, I believe the inclusion of these foods will often help you with your strength gain. And obviously, they need to be eaten alongside hard training because if you didn't train hard, going home and eating these foods isn't going to make you any stronger. So, getting into it, I'm going to start with the obvious one. Popularized, brought to the mainstream by Stan Efferding, but the whole idea of train hard, go home, eat a steak has been around for decades now. The first one is going to be beef, right? We need a protein source. I don't need to explain to you guys why we need a protein source, as it's the building block of all muscle. But we have a lot of options for protein sources, right? Lots of them are pretty comparably good from an amino acids perspective, right? So from just a quality of the protein, the makeup of the protein perspective, a lot of proteins are roughly created equally, I would say. So if we have a lot of options for the composition of the protein itself, we want to look at what do we get with it, right? And if you look at chicken, white fish, what you get with that quality structured protein is not much. That's not to say it's bad. You're getting in quality a spectrum of amino acids, so overall it is positive, right? It's going to help you gain muscle. But if we're trying to optimize our diet, we want to get as much other shit with it as far as micronutrients go. So beef and other ruminoid animals are going to offer us a lot more micronutrients per ounce than we're going to get from those other options. If beef upsets your stomach, that's not the only ruminoid there is. So you can always try lamb and bison. Those are both also ruminoid animals, and they have a higher density of micronutrients per ounce. If the beef is upsetting your stomach at all or you really dislike it, and if none of these things are an option, you can't digest any of them. I think that should have been my other caveat at the beginning, right? These foods might be wonderful. They might have a great amino acid profile. They might have a phenomenal micronutrient profile, but if they wreck your stomach, they're going to be a net negative, and you should go with the next best option. I've kind of played that game for a while myself, being like, oh, but this is optimal. If it's wrecking your stomach, it's going to be a net negative. So if these ruminoid animals, beef, lamb, bison, are really getting you as far as like on the shitter or away from the shitter, right? Salmon is another option for a protein source that has a good amino acid profile, but also comes with a lot of other nutrients. I would also throw in whole eggs, including the yolk, because I think people have kind of been told nowadays that the real outside of the protein, the nutrition of an egg is in the yolk. So if we're looking for a protein source that also comes with a lot of micronutrients, I would include whole eggs in there as well as the salmon if the beef is something that bothers you, or if it's not. They're great protein sources. Number 2 is going to be bananas. There's a myriad of reasons. 1, they're calorie dense. 2, they're micronutrient dense. Those kind of fit into a bulking, strength gaining style diet. They're relatively easy to eat. They come with a reasonable amount of potassium. You're supposed to get like 5 grams of potassium per day, and most people come wildly short of that. I think that the virtues of eating a lot of salt as a performance athlete have kind of been spread to people. But the idea that you're supposed to get a proportionate amount of potassium alongside it seems to has not been propagated quite as much, probably because it's harder. So bananas kind of offer that. I find that if I eat a banana or two before I train, I feel stronger. Whether that's from a carbohydrate perspective, a potassium perspective, it generally I feel stronger. That being said, Bananas are also a common one that hurts people's stomachs. So I think that you could switch that out for like strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, all relatively nutrient dense, all antioxidant dense, all relatively dense in potassium. So we're still kind of ticking that mark. And all of these things contain sugar, and some of that sugar is in the form of fructose. And intaking medium, small amounts of fructose through the day that doesn't exceed the amount that we probably should be eating has a positive stimulatory effect on the liver, both for your overall health and energy levels. You'll find that if you, instead of ingesting a bunch of fructose at once, maybe via high fructose corn syrup, if you're having servings of fruit spaced through the day, you'll find your energy levels tend to be a lot better. If you're someone on the PED side of things, having that positive stimulatory effect on your liver is something that is important for you. But yeah, if bananas don't work, I would go with the other berries, right? Bananas are a berry too, so berries. Number 3 is going to be our primary sourcing of our carbohydrates, and it's going to be a little bit different from the approach we took in the first two. Carbohydrates are obviously important as they're the primary fuel of our training, and I'm just going to put out there it's going to be white rice, it's going to be cream of rice, and it's going to be like rice-based pasta. And you say, okay, well, Sam, that's completely devoid of any micronutrients for the most part. What gives? I thought that was the criteria. And basically the thing is, if you're looking to your bulk carbohydrate for your micronutrients, there's going to be a digestibility problem with the quantities of it that you're going to have to eat, right? We're going to be having to push through large quantities of carbs, and so you're going to need an option that digests relatively easily. And for 99% of people, that seems to be rice and rice derivatives. If you're bored of rice and you want a different flavor profile, you can always get rice-based pasta. You can get cream of rice and do more of a sweet flavor profile, maybe have some whey with it. But because of the quantities we're going to probably have to eat at some point as strength athletes, the digestibility is going to be the big criteria for the carbohydrate source. So we've talked about kind of, what are we looking for in a protein source? A good amino acid profile, got a lot of options, so let's narrow it down with, let's say, something that's dense in micronutrients. Check. We want to be able to ingest a lot of carbohydrates without it upsetting our stomach and feeling bloated and gassy all the time. Kind of rice derivatives, kind of check that mark. Well, what about the last macronutrient, which would be fat? I'm just going to say my 4th one is olive oil. Olive oil is relatively healthful. It seems to be a pretty clean burning fat. You don't feel bogged down after you eat it. You can use it to tactically slow down your digestion, as fat takes longer to digest. So maybe if you eat your pre-training meal and it's mostly just protein and carbs, and you find that you're crashing halfway through that workout because your blood glucose spikes and then falls, you can kind of level out that blood glucose insulin response by making it a little bit slower digesting using a fat. And then find the fat that's going to kind of upset your stomach least to be digesting while training. Olive oil seems to be great. It's good for your heart. Can't extol the virtues of olive oil enough. Just throw a tablespoon of it on your rice and beef. I promise it's worthwhile. It's not great for cooking as it has a relatively low burning point. So you're probably going to want to use either butter or coconut oil or avocado oil. Those are generally the 3 that I'll advocate for cooking, as they are much more stable fats. Number 5 is going to be pineapple and papaya. So you have the micronutrient density is pretty reasonable on those things. The calorie density is pretty reasonable on those things. Again, we can space those intakes of fructose through the day to have that stimulatory effect on the liver. These things are all wonderful, but the primary we've included these is because they include protein breakdown enzymes, right? If we are eating a large amount of protein, especially if you're someone who finds like, hey, I find benefit going past the 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight personally, that is putting a lot of stress on your digestive system to break down that much protein. So helping it out with these protein breaking down enzymes can be quite helpful. And both pineapple and papaya are rich in these things. They taste pretty good, and they're an easy way to fit in some extra calories after you kind of stuff yourself with your beef, rice, and olive oil. And then getting into number 6, this is probably the one that's going to be the most hit or miss, and that's going to be milk. As far as a nutrient density perspective, milk is phenomenal. There's a lot of potassium in it. It's kind of underrated. You have calcium. You have a myriad of other micronutrients. You have a combination of fats, carbs, and protein, and it's a good protein, right? A good amino acid profile. All around, it's wonderful. The problem is that a lot of people can't drink milk, right? They're like, oh, I'm lactose intolerant. It's important to understand that lactose intolerant is a spectrum, right? It's not just a single gene that says you produce lactase or you don't produce lactase. People produce lactase in differing amounts. So let's say it's like some percentage of the population can't drink a glass of milk without getting sick because they don't produce enough lactase to deal with the amount of lactose in the milk. Well, there are dairy options with less total lactose, so maybe the amount you make might be able to handle these things. So if you can't handle a glass of milk, you have Greek yogurt, Icelandic yogurt, or kefir. These things are fermented, so they've got the bacteria already forming, or the prebiotics, probiotics, whatever, that will help you break down that lactose. It's got less lactose because it's partially broken down. So those can be an easier option if you're someone who's kind of middle of the line lactose intolerant. One step further in that direction is any hard cheese has even less lactose in it. It might be an option for people who are pretty darn lactose intolerant but still want to get in that calcium and other micronutrients. And if none of these things work and you need to source your calcium, I would say powdered eggshells is going to be your move. But as far as from a strength building perspective, whatever one of those dairy products that you're able to process in whatever quantity you're able to process it, because it is dose dependent. You can kind of titrate up the amount of milk you drink with time, and your body, most people will have an adaptive response and produce more lactase. So that's something you can play around with. It just offers good options for those of us that can drink it. And then my seventh and final one is going to be the one that's the most boring, it's the most shitty, and no one wants to eat it. Cruciferous vegetables, right? Dark leafy greens. It's like we all know we probably should be eating vegetables from a fiber perspective, from a micronutrient perspective. So it's gonna suck. Most of us don't like vegetables that much, so you're gonna want to eat the one that's gonna have the bang for the buck if you're sucking it up either way. So that's probably gonna be a cruciferous vegetable. So spinach, kale, and broccoli. Make sure you cook them. These things all contain oxalates, which can contribute to kidney stones, and it can also upset your stomach. So if you eat a bunch of raw spinach, or you throw a bunch of raw spinach in your shake, don't be surprised when that shake goes straight through you. If you cook any of these things, then the amount of oxalates is greatly reduced as it breaks them down. If you want the easiest way to cook these vegetables, you can either just fill a pan or a pot with like a little bit of water, put a top on it, just throw the veggies in until they're soft. Or if you're really lazy like myself, you put on your rice in your rice maker, you put the water in there, you put some salt in there, and then you just throw some broccoli in there, and it'll cook as the rice cooks. Ends up working out pretty well. Tastes a lot better, a lot easier to eat, and it makes it easier to digest. That's the least fun part, but it's probably a good habit in terms of building strength. I hope you guys like this video. I should probably start coming in with a more concrete plan of points, but I hope you guys like it.